Okay. I think we got 30 seconds on it there. To be precise and appropriate.
I was going by the electronic clock.
Well, now I don't know what to do.
What does that say up there?
6 o'clock.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we're ready.
Okay, we'll call to order the City Council work session for August the 3rd, 2021. Could you call the roll, please, Amy?
Sure can. Councilor Maher.
I'm here, thank you.
Perfect. Councilor Eglin. Here. Councilor Erickson.
Here.
Councilor Brandale.
Here.
Councilor Skipper.
Here.
Councilor Ward Bullen.
Here.
And Mayor Watkins.
Here.
All in attendance.
Okay, are there changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda with the exception that if there is time, I know the mayor wants to give a briefing about the mayor's conference.
Yeah, but that can wait too. So on to agenda item 2, discussion of in-person council meetings with COVID cases increasing.
Yes, so like most communities around the state of the nation, Yadkin County has seen an increase in COVID case counts. Just last week, there was 116 new cases, and that's the largest one-week increase since the surge in April. So the CDC is currently recommending that everybody wear a mask in the public indoor settings regardless of vaccination status. And so it was thought that council might want to discuss whether or not you're still comfortable meeting in person. If so, under what parameters. So there's open for council discussion.
Comments?
Today, I'm okay with meeting. I don't know about tomorrow. You know, I don't know about.
I mean, I would much prefer meeting in person, but as long as we're doing that, I would also prefer if everyone in here wore a mask. That's my preference, especially those who are not vaccinated.
Any other comments?
I agree.
I think we're on an upward tick of this pandemic yet again. So as been stated, I feel like we need to keep this option on the table.
Would everybody be comfortable with basically saying maybe, maybe not, and just play it by ear for each meeting?
Each meeting is going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll have to see what next month brings, where we are then in terms of the case counts. And it's hard to say. But I would like, but I would like to request that, assuming that we would meet in person, that we all wear masks. I am not happy wearing this mask, but I'm wearing it and I don't want to get sick. And, I've been vaccinated, but there's still breakthrough cases. This variant now is brutal, okay? So, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we'd have the choice then if we want to do the Zoom thing, because right now I can't understand hardly a word
Well, yeah, I mean,
of what you're saying.
right.
Mask.
Yeah, I should have taken it off right then when I was talking, but I will take it off when I'm talking this evening. But yeah, I mean, those who are, I'm assuming those who aren't comfortable can do what Kathy's doing right now and be on Zoom.
I'm fine the way we are right now without, so, but I can't, if it's gonna be a mask mandate, I'm gonna have to be at home because I can't understand what,
Yeah.
just because of the mask, from what's being said. I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody else is that. Any thoughts, Kevin?
No, I agree. I'm comfortable. I mean, I understand and I can respect other people's opinion and feelings. But it is very difficult, and it's very difficult to understand people as is through this context. So if people would like, I will wear a mask. But I might choose in the future to just stay home if that's gonna be an option. I mean, I'm at work where nobody's wearing masks and different things, but
Yeah.
I can respect the opinion of
Well,
others.
I mean, yeah, I mean, for those who are vaccinated, if, like, for instance, myself who's vaccinated, if I were to get a breakthrough infection, if that were to happen, I mean, everything's gonna be okay. But I would prefer not to have that happen.
The other thing we all consider is that we've got, a lot of us have people at home who have immune deficiencies that we could take it home to them. So that's another concern. Having said that, I think we'll just right now say we'll play it by ear and look at what the situation is maybe 3 or 4 days before each meeting and see what's going on. We don't know, they could announce tomorrow that everything's fine. They could announce tomorrow that we're all gonna die, so.
Thanks,
That's
Linda.
true, because they really.
I know. Well, I mean, or anything in between.
Should we be 6 feet apart though too?
Well, therein lies a problem with having a meeting in this building.
Well, I mean, it's that or
Yeah.
some of us stay on Zoom.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, if that's a mandate, be 6 feet apart.
With our current equipment, to be able to get everybody on camera, this is the setup we're kind of stuck with in this room. Until we upgrade significantly our camera equipment. So yes, you're right, if we were to stay 6 feet apart, some would have to choose, and whether you had a consistent person who stayed at home or consistent people who stayed at home, or you alternated, that would obviously be up for discussion, but unfortunately, these are the limitations we have right now.
So is everybody in favor of just playing it by ear then?
We'll just watch things.
That work?
Yeah.
Okay. I forget to look up now and Kathy, is nodding her head. Yes, hi. All righty, moving on. Discussion of moving the October meeting date.
The October meeting date happens to fall at the same time as the International City County Managers Association Conference. This is I found in the past to be a very valuable conference, and it also happens to be hosted in Portland, Oregon this year. So I'm asking for consideration that the council move their October meeting to following Tuesday, October 12th. The other alternative would be that I would be excused from that October meeting.
I'm out of town that week. Meeting.
Okay.
I have no issue with moving it to the 12th.
I'm fine with the 12th.
I as well.
October 12th.
Councilor Brando?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm good.
Good. Are you okay with that meeting without you on the October 12th?
I just can't change my plans. Sorry.
Oh, no. These things happen.
I changed my other plans.
You did, yes, you did. You see? So we're October 12th then.
October 12th.
Okay. And number 3.
Okay, so this item is on both the work session agenda as well as the regular meeting. The work session, it is here so that it will allow for more time for conversation amongst the council. But I did put it on your regular session agenda in case any decisions are reached, you can then you can have votes on regular session. So this is addressing some of the questions that came out of the civic building discussion at the last meeting. One of the questions was about an alternative location. In your packet, and I apologize for the confusion that accompanied this packet, there is a map with city-owned properties in it. 2 of those locations were looked at. That was Ladd Park, the basketball court, and lower park between the homes and the public works building. Also in your memo is current location considerations. With the alternative locations, it varies a little bit by the location area, whether it's like the upper park or the lower park. But in general, parking is a consistent issue, budgetary considerations, and that varies depending on the location, and the programming ability for additional recreational activities within the park is affected by those locations. The current site, we have, some of the considerations is that the new vehicle storage building has already been completed. That was approved by the council as well as the planning commission. Renovation of the parking lot was approved, and that bid will be going out later this summer. The generator placement was considered in the site design review that was approved by the planning commission. Pedestrian infrastructure projects are also considered. And then we have the audio visual. That's another council question that I will need some decision on tonight about which way to go on that. But, so as far as location, those are some of the findings we found through the investigation process. Did council have any questions about that before I move on, or did you want to discuss that part before I move on?
I have a question, I just want to confirm that the Ladd Park location, the basketball court location, we would only be able to build the public safety building there, correct? We could not have the city hall and the public safety there.
Correct.
So they have to be in two separate locations. Okay.
And we do have Mark with us.
Yes, we do have Mark with us today. Sorry, Mark, I wasn't ignoring you, I swear.
No problem,
Did you
thanks.
add anything to the site visits that you and I did?
No, I think you covered it. The one location that we did view, looking for the public safety building, there was some concerns about site access, where we would store vehicles, especially being adjacent to the pool. There's a lot of potential conflict there that could get sorted out for sure, absolutely. But it may not be the optimal solution. So.
Mark for, let's see, you guys who have not met, Mark Schmidt is the head of the architectural firm that was working on the City Hall. He's the head of the architectural firm that was working on the City Hall last year. And we asked him to come back and help us out, which he graciously agreed to do.
Yes, Mark has been very helpful in getting some answers to some council questions I've asked. So thank you, Mark.
No, my pleasure. Happy to help out in any way.
So only public safety, not city hall. You couldn't do city hall and not public safety. Is that true?
Either way, you would have public parking issues as well as being able to have employee parking issues.
Yeah, just I did work.
Yeah. So Mark, I don't know if you want to speak to the square footage of public safety versus the administration side, or whether it could be flip-flopped. But also the budgetary considerations would also be into account on having a contractor at two different sites. Mark, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. In the previous design, I will note that, things probably have shifted over the last year or so. And even so, when we were working with the students back in 2019, but we had identified roughly about 6,000 plus or minus square foot for city administration and city hall and the community room. And then an additional little bit, right around 3,000 plus for the police station functions. So that the police station functions themselves were pretty squashed in the last design that we got to. We initially started with upwards of 4,000 square feet and had to kind of pinch that down a little bit just based on cost constraints and what the realities were for the police department at the time. We were originally designing for a little bit more growth. But when you have real world dollars in place, sometimes you got to make those tough decisions. So we had to kind of scale back to what was more realistic, which was a little over 3,000 square feet for the public safety. And that's just within the walls of the building, not counting vehicular storage or Sally port or any of that kind of information.
Does anybody else have any questions?
So curious, if we build one building and like this package shows, I think Gladstone.
I'm sorry,
This packet you gave us shows some pictures of a new city hall, police department in Gladstone. Is that
oh, that article was talking about the challenges of seismic,
Right.
adding the connection.
So so with that, from what I was reading there, how the engineer had to get a little bit creative. I mean, the building is split, and one side's police, one side's, so they can do the difference in seismic, the amount of seismic stuff they need. So with having to do that, would it not be more economical, even if we had one piece of property and we built two separate buildings?
Mark, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting because when the idea was first brought up to split the buildings into two separate sites, and immediately I was like, oh, that's a great idea. We've had so much kind of, so many issues as far as, how the two programs, City Hall and the police station, are kind of overlapping, and there's some definite conflicting programs there. But when it comes down to it and looking at some of the budget numbers that we received last time, you have a lot of general conditions that contractors will put into their baseline budgets, and that's for setting up on the site, and you're essentially going to be doubling up on that cost, which can be significant from a contractor's perspective. So in the end, it may not net you any gains to go with two separate sites because of the mobilization costs that a contractor would have to have, as well as doing, sites potentially at the same time on two separate sites in the city. So, or I mean, you could go with two separate contractors too, but depending upon experience. But I think I wouldn't be comfortable saying that you would save any money by splitting them up at this point.
And Mark, if, just for argument's sake, if we were to build two buildings on 191 East Main Street, would that be a cost savings of having the two separate buildings?
Oh, so kind of like how Gladstone did, except for maybe not connecting them in the middle.
Yes.
It's actually very close to what our previous design was. We decided about halfway through the process, and I think that this is where maybe some of the communication broke down between the design team and council, was the issue to go ahead and do the entire facility in the category 4 seismic standards. The reason for that would be the community room. The community room became a pretty hot topic in our design meetings. That became really important that was also going to be an emergency operations center. What that means, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but essentially in the event of a disaster, in the event of any kind of big seismic event happening in the city, the current police station, even as designed, would not really hold the full emergency operations. You need a bigger staff. You need a bunch of people operating for that. And so the community room is the most likely candidate towards providing that service. And when we put the community room into that status, then it just kind of made sense, since that takes over, over half of your ground floor program for the city hall, that would just make the whole building. You're not saving that much money by separating anything at that point. And that article that I shared with you guys about Gladstone is a really good example, though, of how you can have two separate buildings, two separate seismic standards, and then there's a big seismic joint that separates them. It's not really very visible in the pictures, and we would also do a very good job of hiding it. However, seismic joints are finicky, they're fussy, and they're also very expensive. That particular design decided to go with a very robust, what's called CLT, cross-laminated timber construction that kind of spanned the difference between the two buildings. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that for this project at this point in time, because as we all know, lumber prices have skyrocketed. So it was a little bit more feasible a couple of years ago. But so I would say that if you wanted to do two separate buildings, I would make them truly two separate buildings on the site, not try to connect them at all. You could potentially utilize a breezeway to make that happen. But it definitely gets a little bit problematic if you try to connect them without making them the same seismic category.
How big of a difference in cost do you see if you just made the whole building, if you did, public safety and office, and did it all at the level 4 seismic,
Mhm.
as opposed to trying to do the two
Yeah,
levels?
great question. When we submitted our designs to R&H Construction as well as architectural cost consultants, we actually, the design that was presented was including all category 4. So it had the entire facility at that higher seismic rating. And I believe it was, around $10,000 or 10,000 square feet, you were looking at about 4.45 million for the project as designed at that point in time. It would be slightly less than that to potentially separate it. The difficulty there is, how finicky and how fussy does that seismic joint get? With the overlapping in program, it was a little bit discouraging early on for us when we were working on it to try to make that happen and make it feasible financially. It ended up kind of being a wash in the end to go to category 4, just because of the size of the building. If the building were much larger, say 20,000, 30,000 square feet, it would obviously have a huge impact because you're talking, an exponential, amount of square footage at a higher cost per square foot. But when you're talking, 6,000 square feet, it's not that big of a difference, I would say. So I can't really put a monetary number on it. What I would say is that there's potential savings, but maybe not quite what you would hope for.
Is there an option to just essentially worry about the city hall instead of public safety station? Because from my understanding, we tried to have a public safety place a few years ago, and it didn't go through. So I think we are more in the need of a city hall right now instead of public safety that's trying to get bundled to city hall.
What the voters rejected was not paying more taxes, not necessarily having a city hall. For me personally, I don't see that as really an option to say, well, let's do the city hall and not the public safety building, because the public safety building, in essence, is what we really need in terms of being emergency preparedness. I mean, in that building that they're in right now is a disaster waiting to happen. But it was the tech. It was not that folks rejected. There was a lot of issues surrounding that whole thing that led up to the bond vote, but it was the rejection of paying more taxes. And then
Did you go out and ask people that, and that was their answer?
well, no, this is what the vote turned out to be. No, I mean, we made a big,
Correct, but it might not
Post-
because they wanted to pay more taxes,
Well-
maybe than for other reasons. So I'm just asking if you went out for a survey and asked.
there was a lot of vocal opposition, a lot of it directed at the police. There was sort of an attack on the police department that was very unfortunate, and that played a lot into that bond failing. So it's just very unfortunate.
What are the repercussions or penalties? Because the police are not in the class 4 building, obviously, right now. When does the state or who enforces and says you need to be in a better facility? Or is it just they ignore it?
Mark, are you aware of an
Sure.
enforcement?
Yeah, that would be through Yamhill County. So right now they're in a temporary permitted status. So they're really not allowed to stay there on a permanent basis. And that's because obviously that building isn't seismically up to code. Initially when we started looking at this project back in 2019, there was the thought of, hey, what if we just did a full seismic retrofit of that building to make that a permanent residence for the police station? And my understanding is that it didn't make sense to spend a bunch of money on that building, just because kind of similarly to what we found when we tried to look at pricing for seismic retrofit for the current city hall. The cost for that just didn't add up when all was said and done, to retrofit a building of that size. And so
In order to bring this, either one of these buildings seismically up to standard, you would basically have to jack up, I'm assuming, the whole building and dig down and build a whole new foundation.
it's essentially building all new exterior walls, and then everything on the inside could fall down, but the whole building wouldn't fall down. If that makes sense. Yeah, it's not an ideal situation by any means. So hopefully we don't have a large seismic event anytime in the near future. So yeah, it's not an ideal situation for them, but Yamhill County would ultimately have the first say on when that permit ends. And I haven't looked into it. It'd be good probably to talk to them, but I'm sure there's a duration that was assigned to that permit.
Yeah.
How big is that building? The building the police department's in now, how big?
The square footage on it?
I don't know, 3 square feet.
Does anybody know?
I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's similarly sized to what we were proposing in our last design, which is a little over 3,000 square feet.
So then that footprint of that building, if it was just straight off the ground, police department would have to operate someplace else. The new building actually could be built there.
Yep.
If we need to build, if Yamhill County stepped up and said, hey, you guys are running out of time, we need you guys in a class 4 seismic folders with this. That could be leveled straight off and built. And then if we needed to, we could wait a year or two before a city hall building is even done, put up. But we already own that property, we own that building. And then later on, we could decide, okay, we're gonna scrape this building off and build a new city hall, or maybe the city comes up with another piece of property somewhere and they're separate on a different spot where you're not having an outlay right now to do both of them at one time.
So are you looking at exploring phasing the project for cost considerations? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm just want to clarify what I'm hearing.
A little bit for cost, but also now afterwards, Kevin brought up if it's, in March they do it, Yamhill County says, they're on a temporary permit. If they say you've got until X number of days or date to do, be in that building, that would be a quicker turnaround, I guess, and a less expensive at this point in time. Scrape that off and build the building.
How long is the temporary permit for?
Well, that's what Mark was saying. He'd have to explore with Yamhill County about what the duration of that permit. We don't have that date, but right at this moment.
That'd be probably good.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And just to clarify, the community room will be the one used if we had an emergency, right? Will be the emergency preparedness room. So that's part of the city hall, not the public safety building.
We would be using it for citizens to come in.
Yeah.
So
So that's
they
what we-
would have a resource for that. Yeah.
So that's different from the police station.
Yeah.
So we would have that regardless of a police station or not. And that's what we need.
Well, we need both. If we let the police station sit there as it is, if the county does come in and say, well, sorry, guys, you got to do something here. The other thing with level 4 is that it means that the police department, if there is an emergency, can operate out of that building. They will have communication backup for their vehicles, backup for radio, which is all pretty critical when you're looking at any kind of emergency. They didn't have it last winter, and it caused them some real heartburn.
And that's where I see, for me, that's higher on the list than having a building set up where X number of people, community go through it at a certain time. The police department, like we saw, I mean, they were
Well-
in a hard way.
The other problem that we had last winter was that everybody that works in this building had to go home and work out of their homes because we had no power, we had no water here for them, we had no facilities. The electricity was gone, so they couldn't get online. Basically, this building just sat here because staff couldn't work out of it. And nobody in town who was calling and saying, hey, where can I go to warm up or recharge my batteries on my phone or my whatever, they didn't have any place to go.
Right.
I think maybe what Councilor Matteo was getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, was I think the original design, the whole building was class 4. So if we went 2 different buildings, we would need to reevaluate because the community center, the emergency center needs to be in class 4. So that would need to be either shifted to the police station building or both buildings would have to be class 4.
If we,
Am I incorrect in saying that?
yeah,
Yeah,
You
That's
are
right.
correct, yeah. So there's the term emergency operations center can be interpreted a few ways. So you can either have it assigned to the community room when it's located in the city hall building, or you would have to identify a larger space within the police station to have your emergency operations center. And the emergency operations center is going to be above and beyond what the police station currently operates at. And that's for, FEMA, for other folks to come out during an event where there's a disaster where you need a much larger ground force essentially than what the police currently operates at. So that's why that emergency operation becomes so critical. And it's essentially an extra space that can be operated out of.
So potentially the cost savings with 2 buildings could be wiped away with the total redesign of either the police station and or city hall, possibly, versus having
Potentially.
one. Because I know you said like if you had 2 different buildings, there's a potential cost savings having one building class 2, one building class 4, versus having one facility class 4. And if we're redesigning the whole city hall now with the emergency operations center in the police building, that cost savings could go, we could be right back to where we started.
I believe I'm following you.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I jumped around there. I guess I would like to know, I know you can't give us numbers, but it's like,
Right.
does it make sense to pursue one building as class 4 like we originally were? Or, is it worth it to save? I would like to save money as much as possible, but if exploring the 2 different buildings ultimately doesn't pencil out and we're back to square one, does that make more sense?
It does. So I will put this caveat out there that we did not explore previously the site where the police station is currently operating out of. In all of our designs, that building was to remain. And then once the transition happened and police moved into the new building, that building in our initial designs was going to be turned back over to retail, which my understanding is no one really loves that building for retail, but that was the initial intent. And then I think it would turn into potentially that area just being turned into parking lot, which we really felt like after that kind of came onto the plate that, why don't we build in that spot? Why don't we make that corner much more appealing from Main Street and from Pine, that you look down the street and you actually see the Civic Center. It's not hidden behind an old retail building. Plus, there's the effect of the large setback that's happening there from the dentist building. It's a beautiful building, but it's a good 40 feet back from the street. So you don't have much street frontage right there. And so the opportunity to really recapture a focal point from the center of town shifting over is something that really kind of excited us, and also could bring much more attention and detail to the City Hall building, not trying to kind of hide it behind this other building. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, and especially with the way that this discussion's going, where you could potentially create two buildings with that expanded site, if you're including where the police currently are, you certainly would have enough site space to all site together to be able to build two separate buildings on that site. And it's something that we haven't explored yet, and I obviously don't have any, rough budget numbers to throw at that, but there's definitely potential there. One area that I did want to bring up, and I'm sure we'll get into this here in a few minutes when I show you guys some of the just real quick sketches, was exploring the idea of retail. I don't know if we wanted to jump to that, and maybe I'm going ahead in your agenda, and I apologize.
That was exactly my question. I didn't know if we were going to look at that now or wait till the regular session.
Sure. Okay, I
So
can
wanted
wait.
to make sure
Sorry.
we didn't have any future discussions or questions about alternative locations at this point in time before we move on.
Okay,
No, but thank you
gotcha.
for looking.
Sure.
I appreciate that a lot.
Sure. So then the next section of the memo talks about other applications. So it talks about green infrastructure, it talks about retail, talks about community uses, and of course, a facade change. Because it was very well heard that the shed roof was not well liked. So looking at those items, I asked Mark to do to incorporate those ideas, but to do a very brief sketch, not a whole lot of time spent into it. I heard council loud and clear, don't spend a whole lot of money right now. We just want to explore these ideas. And so he's come up with what I've asked him is sort of back of the napkin sketch of what it might look like. And can Mark share his screening? Okay. Mark, you're able to share your screen.
Sure. No, you guys don't get too excited because this is the old student sketch. So I'm just showing this for precedent because I know that not the entire city council that's present today wasn't part of the discussion a few years back when we were working with the students from George Fox University. But this was the end result of a few months of design and research and modeling that we did with George Fox. The students really came up with kind of the sort of underlying ethos of what the project wanted to be. And then at that point in time, this was the final deliverable from that class, which actually this is sort of myself, we rendered this based off of some of the concepts that the students came up with. The kind of key overarching design things that were involved in this that we wanted to remain was obviously the brick, the texture of the brick and how it related to downtown. There was this 2-story facade that also had tiebacks to the downtown architecture. And then this sort of grand entrance, this sort of procession bringing you into the Civic Center of City Hall. So where we ended up with at the end of or middle of last summer was a presentation to City Council where there's a lot in play as to why this building ended up being the shape that it is. But what you can see here is that the main changes are splitting the building into 2 separate sides with a 1-story police function building and a 2-story City Hall building. And then instead of having a covered central area, we actually opened it up to the sky and kind of carved it out to be part of the interior-exterior experience. So what we started with in a sketch, this is obviously before we rendered it from the last slide last year, was this, where we kind of got to a point where we started to really enjoy what was happening with the shed roof design. And I will preface this by saying that the shed roof design was really a callback to, one, the zoning that the current location is in. It's in a railroad district, it's not in downtown. So we did want to respect what the current zoning is. And so we were using some roof forms that were more agricultural, more railroad driven, kind of those kind of granary type implications. We were a little bit hesitant to show just the flat roof design particularly because we felt like we needed to sort of blend between the rural and back into the downtown core architecture. But we got a lot of comments, and I'm totally open to any additional comments you guys have on this design, because we're all still learning in this. These are the comments that we had, and I've shared this with Shannon. Obviously, number one would be removing the shed roof design. That just was kind of overwhelmingly, no one loved it, which is totally fine. Another big key element was changing the brick color back to something that's closer to what the city hall, or I'm sorry, not city hall, but the bakery building has. Much more richer, redder, kind of deeper historical brick color. The other element would be exploring the potential for a two-story frontage. As the building was right now, we kind of expanded the footprint on the ground level to sort of make use of some of the cost per square foot of building on a single level over where the police station is. So what we would do is we would relook at, having a more grand facade on the front of Main Street. So you had that two-story facade all the way across. 3, exploring alternate options for the central entry. By pushing it back, we thought that creating this sort of open garden space that you would kind of proceed through to enter into the building was quite nice. However, we understand that it wasn't really received that way. It more felt like we were getting rid of some grand central entry. And then last, we had the potential to explore the property to the west, which is what the current police station is in. So all of those being considered, the only one that we really didn't address yet was exploring the property to the west, because I felt like there was probably going to be a lot of discussion happening in today's meeting about that site. So this is just a process sketch that I shot over to Christy. This is literally like a collage, the mishmash of some previous designs, and it's really just the two-story frontage with a grand central entry, and then we kind of refined that sketch a little bit more to sort of create these a much more transparent facade where you actually have a lot of glazing in there. We kept the overall design from the corner right now from the east as you lead into town from the east, but I don't have a view yet from the west as you're looking at it from downtown, and that's primarily because of the potential to explore that adjacent site. But what you're seeing here is much more traditional downtown architecture. There's definitely some cleaner lines associated with this. In the process sketch that I shared with Shannon and Christy, you can see that we have some sort of arching windows that we're proposing that might kind of lead in. We could easily pull those back into the design. And then this one, we showed sort of some wood coming down to really sort of bring that textural and warmth back in to the front of the facade. Whereas if we just had glass and just brick, maybe it wasn't quite as soft as we'd want it to be. So again, this is just a quick sketch that we put together to just kind of get folks to think, okay, how can we explore different opportunities for this site? How can we relook at, where the building ended up and, the successes and failures of the previous design, and finding something that really everyone in Carlton, most notably the city council, really feels like they love and they feel like it's part of the city. So again, this is just a quick sketch. If you guys hate it, we totally understand. No worries, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. We're just kind of starting this process again, so.
I, for one, Mark, thinks we are way better off. Nicely done.
Thank you.
And I see the potential there to put some retail on that ground level, maybe generate some revenue back in the terms of rents. I think that could be a smart plan for us. Thank you.
So the main floor is retail?
So this was an exploration to gain more square footage by incorporating the two-story on both sides of that entryway. So I don't think Mark has put a number or where retail necessarily would be. It's just to give the council an idea of what it would look like so that you can have an additional discussion. Is that truly an option you want in this building?
What do you mean by retail, like renting little offices or stores there, like what we're talking?
Yes, it could be coffee shop, it could be an insurance agent, it could, yes, any sort of retail opportunity.
Is that common in other city halls? Is that something that happens? Because I feel like I've never seen it.
No, I can't say that I've necessarily have seen it. It was just something that came out of council discussions as ideas, and so we're just exploring that.
We do it in Lincoln City. I haven't seen it, but that's what I heard.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, Lincoln City?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. That's what I
They do
heard.
have a grocery store attached to it. You're correct. I apologize.
Shannon, I know that we've talked about this before, but have we, I'm gonna ask again, thought about some sort of survey to see what the community members would like?
So I did reach out to the survey company, the Nelson Company, and they said, given the size of the population, it would really be cost prohibitive for them to be able to provide a good value to the city of Carlton, just due to the size of the voters in the city of Carlton and what they could provide.
What I have heard though, Jamie, the last go, well, not the last, the first one when we were having the bond, is that feedback from the community, feedback from the City Hall ad hoc committee was that there would be a lot more acceptance in the community and buy-in if something, not necessarily retail, but that there's features in this building that bring value to the community. You know what I'm saying? So,
No, I think.
so that was a big feedback. So we already know that. The question is, how do we do that?
And that's why I'm wondering if there's just a way we could even do a simple survey, whether it's on Facebook or something. I don't know what questions you would ask, but I think people would feel a little bit more included.
Council President, do you want to talk about the community engagement process that has gone on through this project?
From way back, I mean, we did do surveys, could do a survey again. You know, I know that we also had a couple, we've had 2-3 town halls. Unfortunately, those are not well intended, you know, so we have to, and also the surveys that were sent out. I don't think we did one specific to City Hall, but we've done other surveys, city surveys, and we have a moderate response rate to those.
Who did the surveys? I mean, was this
What was generated by,
staff of city?
yeah, it was
hall,
generated
or was-
here. It was
Electronic. I think
It's an electronic.
Survey Monkey.
it may be, I don't remember.
I think we did one through that.
Yeah,
But it was an outside source. That did survey.
no, they didn't do it. We used an application to do the survey.
When you say we.
We, the city staff, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But, yeah, so that's been my experience, you know, either in response to this, you know, I think in terms of outreach to the community, I think maybe we need to think of a more innovative way to do it where we're gonna get a better response. And how that happens, I don't know yet, but I think the 2 things we've done in the past haven't been all that successful. So,
I think that's a great idea. We could get some feedback from the community. I would feel better.
I mean, I think we have
could
some
put a
time to
kiosk
do
in the
that,
park and
right?
People come and drop their vote.
Should
Shannon?
we,
Could
should
we put some,
provide,
oops, sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
Here's what I need from council is some direction about what mechanism do you want a survey to do? What kind of questions, what kind of answers, what kind of feedback are you looking for? Because as Councilor Edmund noted, the challenge with any sort of survey is the right question to generate the feedback you're looking for. Not that you're trying to channel which kind of feedback you're getting or what answers you're getting, but that it's productive feedback. The other thing that we would need to know as far as council direction, we being Mark and I, is what do you want us to do with the design process between now and the next meeting? Do you want us to try to incorporate design, or how long do you want us to wait in incorporating those design elements or that redesign? And sort of continuing to focus and channel the conversation so that we keep moving forward on the council goal. And so we've got a lot of things in play there with the timelines of construction and bidding and redesign, financing, construction rates, interest rates, which are all in your memo as well. And so, again, we would need some clear direction about what council's looking for, what mechanisms you want us to search out, and what kind of time frame are you looking to have to make this decision and get this input.
Well,
I was gonna say, the survey, we don't really necessarily have to wait for the survey results in order to start the process of getting the financing, right? Like, this is more the design aspect of it, I imagine. And the other thing I was gonna ask is that, could we provide some type of incentive for people in order to do the survey, something like financial incentive to spend money, probably like $5 or, and I don't know, something that could be in the budget. And my other idea is maybe,
Discount on water bill.
yeah, sort of like the same idea. The other, what is the option of sending like a staff to go around town and just collect data from people around town, just like knock on doors, you just go talk with people, like how much, how effective that would be.
So actually knocking on doors, I'm not sure about effectiveness, but I will tell you right now, we are short-staffed. And so having somebody be able to go door to door and to not essentially do their day-to-day functions in addition to the functions they've picked up while we're waiting for a new employee to start, that would be very challenging right now. To be able to send somebody as a staffer to go door to door.
Can we put something in their water bills?
We can put something in the water bills. Christy, do you want to speak to a discount on the water bill as an incentive?
Well, right now we wouldn't be able to do that. We're just turning into Mac Water and Light tomorrow. And it would be hard to do that on the water bill as we are on a different water system. Afterward, we'd have to actually look at it where we're at budgetarily to offer a discount on a water bill.
I was thinking more in terms of just as the mailing mechanism.
We can mail it out in any water bill. We do that often for things that are important. And that's not too bad. It runs around $3.80 to do a two-sided colored insert.
we could as council bite the bullet and just go start knocking on doors and ask.
What are we asking? I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah.
What are we,
That's what
are we
we need to
asking the
do is come down
retail,
with.
the retail question, or?
I think, I don't know what we're asking. What I think if we can get the community members at least engaged somehow so that they know that we will get a better response, because I think people are gonna look at this and I think they're gonna say, oh my gosh, what are we spending our money on? I mean, that's what they're thinking. I've heard it.
Like,
And, you know, how do we say this is why we need to do it? And, you know, I never heard about the temporary certification, please, on the building. I don't know if people know that. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I think part of it, in addition to maybe, you know, offering something that gives back to the community, is really outreach to educate the community on what we have, well, at least I have been educated on in the last few months since the ice storm, of the need, of the pressing need, which actually that was not discussed back at the time when we did the bond. That whole issue wasn't, you know, out there, but now it's a huge issue. So yes, I mean, folks might look and go, that's sort of an extravagant idea, but it's really, we're in a point of necessary, you know, and but that outreach and communicating why is the important part. Yeah, I agree with that.
And we do
get
have,
a lot of negative feedback, I think, if we don't try something.
were you gonna say something?
Your point about that we all us go pound the pavement, okay, I would probably raise my hand to that. But I know people will probably, you start going too much, you start throwing a lot of city hall stuff out there. People are gonna be like, well, let's get the water fixed first. That's the, I mean, I would say that's probably the biggest question mark that people have in town is, why is it so expensive? When's it gonna get fixed? Why is it taking us so long? Why is it so, you know, I mean.
Yeah,
And I've been trying to educate people about, oh, this is why, as much as I can.
The thing is, we are doing it, Grant, I mean, you know that,
And
right?
what?
We are in process, you know.
Oh, I understand that, and I tell people that too.
We're getting 14, basically more than 14 million in grant money to do these projects.
And
Yeah,
that type of information is I mean, I don't look for my watch, I just pay it. So I don't know if that type of information is in the envelope, and open it up, see a little card that, you know, an update that, you know, we've already put in what, 10,000 feet of the line, and, you know, these kind of things that
Yeah,
are
that's stuff that
letting
Shannon.
them know that let them know that the process is happening, it's going on. We don't see it right now, you know, unless you drive up Panther Creek Road and go out.
but I am seeing in the tidbits that you send out to the community.
Oh, yeah, they're in the tidbits, I get
They
that,
are.
but that's still, people have to go,
Yeah.
still have to go to the computer and look that side of stuff up.
So I hear you saying, Councilor Erickson, as part of the messaging, to take some of that information and putting in the tidbits and repeat it in the water bill for those people who aren't inclined necessarily to sign up for the newsletter or to go to the website themselves
Correct.
and look at that. And to highlight the transmission line, the bill that the governor's going to sign hopefully next week. And that will have the 5.8 million for the wastewater plant, and the fact that once that is in place, we will be reanalyzing the rates. Is that what I'm
That,
hearing?
correct, that's the exact, we gotta somehow let the people, let everybody in town. Not everybody's gonna, they just pay this, but there are a lot of people that are concerned and wanna know why. And I just don't think we're getting the message or the
Completely,
information
yeah.
out to them.
Yeah.
That they're not hearing it.
Yeah, I mean, we've done, and staff, I think, has done a really good job of changing the way that we're communicating, and they're getting a lot more out than they're used to be getting out even. So we've been working on that, I think, for the last 8 months. Sounds like we need to do some more work on it, so, you know.
So about the survey though, not the water bill, can we do it electronically, like create some type of survey, some free? Like, I think Google has survey that you can possibly do. I think the question's probably the hardest part to figure out what we want to ask.
Yeah,
But I think if we do electronic and maybe having something in the park, like we talked about, having something people could like write, like maybe put some sticky notes or something, some type of picture in the, like in the upper part, that people could just make comments on the city hall. I think maybe we could reach different people, like people that are more savvy electronic, people that are more walking around the city and just want to write something off. And maybe having some paper surveys or something there as well, people could fill out. So maybe that way we could reach a number of people.
Shannon, I just want to say that our website does have the possibility to create and push out to over, let's see, it's at 1,300 people right now, a survey. You'll just have to narrow down the questions, what you want to ask, and you can actually require narrative, not yes or no answers, but I'm not sure about the sticky notes. But just throwing it out there, we do have that capability.
So it would be narrowed down. We would need to know what questions council is looking to have in.
I have a question that kind of comes up with what Jeremy was brought up a couple of conversations ago about possibility of doing a phased approach of building one building first. And I wanted to ask Mark, I mean, I know that this last year, this COVID year, 20 to, you know, this year and a half plus now, is sort of an anomaly, but what is sort of the overall trajectory and the projections in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of construction costs, not absolute costs, but percentage wise in terms of increase? If you know.
Great question. If I did know, I'm sure we'd be, everybody would be asking us to be their architect. But unfortunately, we don't know. But what I can tell you is that we've gotten some positive movement recently from some of our budget meetings. And that's great news. A couple of our projects are going into construction. There's a lot of consternation, obviously, about huge increases in costs for steel, metal, wood, everything across the board was going up exponentially. And things have started to reel themselves in, thankfully, towards the end. So a couple of projects that we had, we were originally exceeding our budgets, and within the last couple of months, it kind of self-corrected, and we are on budget for a number of projects. And so what I could say from a construction standpoint, you're not seeing the same sort of escalations that you would have seen 6 months ago, because it all comes down to certainty, and being able to project what's coming down the pipeline. Hopefully this, Delta variant doesn't throw all that into question again, but there's been a certain level of consistency lately that has certainly quieted some of the budget increases that are happening.
What about when you look back historically, like 5 years back?
We're at 7 o'clock.
You just have to answer that one question quickly.
Quick.
Where are we compared percentage-wise to years past?
Yeah, historically.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. I could certainly pull some stuff up for you though, to look at. And in fact, I could probably engage with a couple of contractors to give you pretty firm, percentage-wise increase just on escalations. I don't want to say anything right now that's incorrect, but I can get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to end the work session. And it is 7 o'clock, so we will call the regular meeting to order. Please.
All right. Councilor Montero.
I'm here.
Councilor England. Here. Councilor Erickson.
Here.
Councilor Brandeo.
Here.
Councilor Skipper.
Here.
Councilor Ward Mullen.
Here.
Mayor Walton.
Here.
All in attendance and accounting for.
Councilor Ward Mullen. Okay.
It's my turn this week.
Yes. Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Okay, so changes or additions to the agenda.
Item 8A, the request for water service outside city limits is being removed from the agenda.
Okay, ceremonies, appointments, announcements. We have none tonight. On to citizen comments. I'm just going to read through this. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any items on or off of the agenda. When invited by the mayor, members of the public shall come forward, state your name and street address, and direct all comments to the mayor. Comments are typically limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is allowed. We start this with, if anybody has any comments on an item that is not on the agenda. Are there any folks who want to speak up? All quiet?
All quiet, no hands raised.
Okay, then we move on to item B, which is items that are on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments on anything on the agenda?
Okay, no hands raised.
Okay, then we will close that section of the meeting and move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to accept the consent agenda presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion's carried. We are down to ordinances, resolutions, discussion, and action items. Item A has been removed. We are at item B, the ordinance for Ziply Fiber franchise agreement, second reading.
Mayor Watkins and council, this is the second reading of the Ziply Fiber franchise agreement that was presented to the council at the July meeting. City attorney, do you want to add any items? Any
No,
comments?
no comments.
Do I have a motion on this agenda item? Would anybody like to make a motion on this second reading? We need a motion to approve this agenda item.
Make a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign ordinance number 2021-7-731, granting a franchise to Frontier Communications, Ziply Fiber to conduct general telecommunications business, and a right to use Carlton public rights of way within the city limits.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Let me read that, name that ordinance into the record. Ordinance 2021-731, ordinance granting Frontier Communications Northwest LLC, DBA Ziply Fiber, a franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a telecommunications network within the city of Carlisle.
Thank you. All in favor?
This is a roll call vote.
Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Counselor Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Eglin, how do you vote? Aye. Counselor Erickson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Brandeo, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Skipper, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Ward Wallen, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mayor Watkins?
Aye.
All in favor, motion passes.
Thank you. That was quick. All righty. Item C, ordinance number 2021-733, landscape strip definition.
Yes, it was discovered that there's differences in language utilization of the code, but franchise strip and landscape strip mean the same thing. This was an attempt to clean that up. It was recommended by the Planning Commission. You do have in front of you later at this meeting the RFP to move forward with an updated comprehensive plan and the design code update. So you do have the alternative to wait for that full comprehensive code, comprehensive plan and design code update before moving forward on this, or to approve this tonight. And I believe it would need to be.
Right, and it's not currently set up as an emergency clause. You would read it tonight and the next week.
Is there any repercussions for just waiting for the RFP?
There's no cost difference on that.
I mean, if we update now, staff will have to update the code, right? So it will take a little time, however, but if we wait, we can just do everything in a big batch, change everything we need. So it'll be sort of a waste of time to do it now.
If we agree to wait, is that just a consensus vote to wait? Or do we have to?
Or just not have a motion to read it.
All right.
What I'm hearing is there a real benefit to do it tonight.
There is no urgency in doing it tonight.
Okay.
It is
So,
purely a council decision.
okay.
I move that we delay on moving forward with ordinance number 2021-733, clarifying the definition of landscape strip to have the same meaning as planting strip, and wait until we go through the process of the comprehensive plan and the development code.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, ordinance number 2021-732, transient tax update.
This is a requirement of the Department of Revenue to be able to collect our transient lodging taxes, and I'm going to ask Amy to give us more detail on the requirements she's going to give the state.
Okay, so the Department of Revenue is offering this service to collect our transient tax from the people that rent in their homes in the city. So currently they pay quarterly tax. That tax is paid to the city. It's a 7% or a portion of their total revenue. They pay it in two ways. They have payments that for tax collected for Airbnb rentals and tax collected for VRBO. So if they rent through both of them, they have two forms, two checks, and we have to have that for each rental. So can get a little hairy. So some of them choose to only rent through Airbnb where they just have one check. VRBO cuts a check directly to us. So they submit a form, but the providers don't submit any money if they rent through VRBO. So we take all those VRBO forms and match it to the check that VRBO sends us every quarter. It can get a little hairy as well. So what the state is offering to do is to collect all of that transient tax on behalf of the city, and they keep track of who's paid, who hasn't paid, and they also keep track of any vacation rentals that might be operating without a permit or operating without paying their taxes. So they kind of do some compliance. They're using the pretty well-known host compliance. It's owned and operated by Granicus, which is another big software company. And they actually take your city and they map out your current vacation rentals. And so if they see something pop up on Airbnb, they flag it, they send them a letter that they're out of compliance for not having a permit. So it kind of takes that compliance off of our shoulder, as well as the quarterly balancing for a small annual fee every month.
So they do charge this.
They do charge, but it's compared to the staff time that we're spending now, it's quite a bit.
Counselor Skipper?
That was part of my question, is that on page 48, it says DOR recoups their administrative costs. And then I saw something on page 50 of 5% administrative charge. So does that essentially mean they're taking 5% of the 7%?
They will charge us 5% of the total, excuse me. I had to double check and read that, but they will charge us 5%. So currently, right now, our income is down compared to years past rentals, just because of COVID. We're starting to come back out of it. So we do have to pay for it, but compared to the staff time that we currently take in compliance, and then with monitoring who's paid, who hasn't paid, it takes at least 6 to 8 weeks to get everybody to pay, keep track of who hasn't paid, who we haven't received forms for, if VRBO's paid. So it's a very time-consuming process for us on the staff end.
How many staff hours does that take?
It varies. If providers pay without us having to kind of remind them and then actually send out notices of default, it maybe will take 12 to 15 hours, but then if nothing balances to what the forms and what HomeAway has submitted a check for, it can be quite extensive.
Per week, per month?
I spent a whole week trying to balance the VRBO.
So 40 hours in a month?
So it'd be 4 times a year,
4 times a
because
year.
they pay quarterly.
Amy, when those checks come in and the way you're talking about them coming in, that means that you're not able to keep track of any new VRBOs or vacation rentals that are coming up if somebody decides not to file for a permit.
I also keep track. So if anybody, I check VRBO, Craigslist, Airbnb about every other week, if not every week, for any non-compliant currently renting houses that don't have a permit. So I check that. And then we also check multiple other sites, but with me working on the planning commission and working with the vacation rental owners, I have the sheet of knowing who has a permit, who's valid renter, so I know instantly when one pops up, it is not a permitted
Yeah.
access.
But you're already doing that
I'm doing
now.
that in
and
addition
That's
to-
in addition. So in addition to say the 40 hours that you're spending on just making sure they're compliant, you're
Doing
running
that
down and checking out and
every
tracking.
2 weeks a year. Mhm.
And how much would that be, the 5% that they would be charging a year?
That I don't know. It would just depend on overall revenue.
How much do we charge last year? Do you know?
We charge 7% currently to proprietors.
What was our revenue last year?
What's that?
What was our revenue last year?
Chrissy might know, I do
Like
not.
ballpark.
Last year wasn't normal.
Ballpark 35,000.
So 7% of that.
Last year was down, so.
It'd be 5% of that. That's our 7% collection.
Wow. 7% of 35, right?
5%.
5%.
I guess that was the only question I had was, is it on page 50 on section 3.16.020, is it 5% per? I guess maybe that doesn't matter, sorry. I was just wondering if it's per transaction or if it's a total. But I guess it doesn't matter.
For example,
Works out the same.
One way or another, yeah. Any other questions?
I mean, it seems like it's saving money. I'm looking at, I'm just guessing $30 an hour over the 60 hours. That's 4,800. And for 35,000, 5% is 1,750. So it's cheaper doing with the about $3,000 savings.
Do we have a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Motion would be for the first reading of ordinance number 2021-3732.
This is an
This
ordinance.
is first, we don't vote on it tonight.
Yeah, you can vote on the first reading tonight, yes.
Yeah.
Need a second though.
Then the second reading, that
At your next meeting. So you have another month to think about
I'll second it.
Got 2 seconds there.
I'll go
Okay,
ahead
yes,
and
Walt.
read the ordinance for the record. Ordinance number 2021-732, ordinance, City of Carlton, 7% transient lodging tax.
We need a vote.
Great. Councilor Maher, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Eglin? Aye. Councilor Erickson?
Aye.
Councilor Brandeo?
Aye.
Councilor Skipper?
Aye.
Councilor Nolan?
Aye.
And Mayor Watkins?
Aye.
Seven, all in favor.
Now, one real quick question after all of that. Does the transient lodging tax, does that go into the Visit Carlton Fund?
To answer that,
City- Go ahead, Christie.
70% goes into the Visit Carlton Fund, 30% maintains itself in the general fund.
Thank you, sorry. That's in here.
Can we just drop out at some point when it's not cost effective anymore, or is that something gonna be until we don't want it anymore?
Maybe have they talked about if the city decides to opt out in the future? During
They-
these discussions?
There has not been. It is a brand new program. They actually haven't even started it yet. It's kind of pushed back. So that's definitely something that I can ask them to look into.
It's very likely there's an opt-out situation. It's true of the marijuana tax that different cities have, that the state applies. There's probably will be an agreement between the city and the Department of Revenue relating to the collection, and that agreement will ultimately probably come back to you for approval, and it will have termination provisions.
Moving on to item E, Tetra Tech contract amendment.
Mayor Watkins and council, in front of you is an amendment to the Tetra Tech personal services agreement for general engineering services. This agreement was originally entered into in 2015, and it allowed for 5 one-year extensions. Those one-year extensions have expired, and this amendment allows for continuance of that agreement with, again, one-year extensions with the city manager's approval from here on out. City attorney, would you want to add anything to that?
No, there's no substantive change to your existing general service agreement, which had expired. This is retroactive back to July 1. So it picks up where the old contract left off. It gives the city the option to extend for up to 4 more, 5 more additional one-year terms at the city's option. So it's essentially a one-year extension for this general services agreement with Tetra Tech. The other substantive provisions of the same.
Are there any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. It says, the city reserves the exclusive right to extend the contract by written notice from the city manager. Is that something that will become before council in every one-year increment, or does once we agree with this, then the city manager has the sole responsibility of extending that up to 5 years without city council?
This authorizes the city manager to extend it, but doesn't preclude the city manager from consulting with the council. If either the city manager wants to or the council desires. But it does vest the authority of a routine extension in the city manager.
And hopefully we would be notified before that happens. Okay, is there any other discussion or question?
It looks like there's no hourly increase at this time. Is that correct?
Not by virtue of this agreement, that the extensions allowed the change in rates over time based upon change in hourly billing rates, but that has to be agreed to by both the city and Tetra Tech as a part of an extension.
All right, thank you.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the First Amendment to the agreement between the city of Carlton and Tetra Tech for engineering services and authorize the execution of the amendment.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, the Hawn Creek Pump Station Bid Award.
Yes, the bid opening was held virtually on July 29th at 2 p.m. And I'm going to refer to our city attorney as well as our city engineer to give a summary of that bid opening and the subsequent protests.
I'm going to refer initially to the city engineer who can describe the bid opening and their subsequent recommendation. And then I want to discuss with the council a set of draft findings that I have prepared based upon the city engineer's recommendation that I, by the way, concur with. So, Gordon, are you available?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. So in your packet, there should be a letter on last Thursday, July 29th, 2 p.m. We had the bid opening using a virtual platform for the Hawn Creek Sanitary Sewer Pump Station. There were 6 bids received. We did a math check, found errors in one of the bids, Settler Supply. Correcting the bid did not change the results of the bid opening. The apparent low bidder was R.L. Reimers Company at $1,392,120. We checked the contractor's board and references. It all checks out. The engineer's estimate was $1.175 million. The day following the bid opening, we received a bid protest by the second low, McClure and Sons. They were at 1,460,873. They contend that the apparent low bidder did not supply all the required information, specifically the bidder qualifications. While this would not affect the bid amount, it may be a valid protest. And subsequently, yesterday, we received a second bid protest by the third low bidder, Trenchline, contending that the low bid and second low bid did not provide information with regards to authorization to sign the bids. And we also received a rebuttal letter from R.L. Reimers indicating that they believe that the informalities are small and can be waived. So we have those three letters, and we consulted with the city attorney and the city manager, and after reviewing the information, our recommendation is that we reject all the bids and rebid the project immediately. So if you have questions, that.
Supplement Gordon's comments, and feel free to break in and ask a question at any point. I want to go over the draft findings that our office has prepared that in support of the recommendation presented by Mr. Monroe. And so if you'll bear with me a little bit, I just want to get this stuff into the record. The first thing is the city advertised an invitation to submit bids for the Long Creek Pump Station with a bid opening date of July 29, 2021. 2 bid protests have been received. The first bid protest is from McClure & Sons. It claims the apparent low bid of R.L. Weimer is non-responsive due to a failure to submit a bidder qualification form with the bid. Second bid protest is from Trenchline Excavation, repeating the same allegation as to the apparent low bidder and adding an additional allegation that neither R.L. Weimer or McClure & Sons provided evidence of authority to sign a bid. The solicitation packet contained instructions to bidders provided in 1.6 as follows, and I have given you the highlighted language in yellow, which I don't think I'll repeat verbatim, but I do want to emphasize that it provides that the owner may conduct such investigations as owner deems necessary to assist in the evaluation of any bid, to establish responsibility qualifications in accordance and financial ability of the bidders. The bidder shall supply all necessary information requested by the owner's engineer. This language had been approved by our office and was modified from prior versions to specifically delete the requirement for submission of a statement of qualifications at the time of submission of bids. This requirement for submission of qualifications, but only upon request, was reiterated in section 420 of the solicitation that I've given to you in highlighted language, the language from section 420 that relates to contractor qualifications information. And it says in A, the bidder shall furnish upon request information including but not limited to demonstrating ability and experience in performing work. And then under quality assurance submittals, upon request, a bidder will be required to furnish a statement of experience. Due to a miscommunication between the city attorney and the city engineer, language in the bid form was not modified to clarify that submittal of qualification by bidders could be undertaken either upon submittal with the bid or upon request from the city engineer after receipt of bids. On July 26th of this past month, the city engineer's office issued addendum number 2. That addendum number 2 mistakenly included the following language. The bidder's qualification form must be included with the bid. See section 0300 1.05 for a list of required items to be included. The inclusion of this language in addendum 2 was a mistake by the city and compounded the ambiguity contained in the solicitation documents. The intent of the solicitation documents was for a responsibility investigation to be undertaken and completed based upon the city engineer's request for information after receipt of bids, not for disqualification of an otherwise qualified bidder due to a failure to include qualification information in the submission of the bid. So the purpose and intent of this solicitation documents is not to set up a situation where a qualified bidder could be disqualified because of the timing of when they showed that they were qualified. Upon opening the bids, it was noted that the apparent low bidder had not submitted with its bid a statement of qualifications form required by addendum 2, but not required by the instructions to bidders section or the bidder qualification section 420. The bidding format should not have required the submission of a qualifications form as a condition of considering a bid that is submitted. Submission of such form and information can be a helpful starting point for a responsibility investigation, but is not intended by the city to be a requirement for a responsive bid. On July 30, 2021, a written bid protest was received from the second low bidder, McClure & Sons, claiming that the bid by the apparent low bidder, R.L. Reimer, was non-responsive due to non-submission of a bidder qualification form, and that such bid should be rejected. R.L. Reimer has communicated to the city its position, and you have a copy of that letter, that their bid was responsive and should be considered, and that the failure to submit a qualification form or information due to the ambiguity in the solicitation documents is a minor informality which can be raised. The second protest from Trenchline Excavation received yesterday, August 2nd, 2021, relates to corporate signing authority and arises from the parenthetical language in the bid form requesting that the bidder, if a corporation, attach proof of signatory authority. The instructions to bidders provide bids by corporations must be executed in the corporate name by the president or vice president. And then parenthetically, or other corporate officer accompanied by evidence of authority to sign. So the instructions to bidders indicate a president and vice president can sign without providing authority, but some other corporate person needs to show that they have actual authority to sign the bid. Trenchline has asserted such attachment is mandatory for a bid to be responsive. There is no showing by Trenchline Excavation that any of the persons signing any of the bids was not a president or vice president of the bid or otherwise authorized to do so. And the city engineer indicated to me today, the bids of the low and the second low bidders were signed by the reported presidents of those two corporations. The city, number 10, the city is experiencing a shortage of available housing development, which is waiting in part on the completion of the pump station upgrade. The city is party to a development contract to make good faith efforts to proceed with the pump station project during the current construction season. 11, the acceptance of either the apparent low bid or the bid of McClure & Sons or the bid of Trenchline Excavation will subject the city to multiple party litigation challenging the legitimacy of whichever bid is accepted. Any such litigation may be costly and time consuming and will delay the commencement of the project. Due to the conflicting provisions contained in the solicitation documents and the lack of attachment of signing authority, there is a possibility that one or both of the protests will be sustained upon judicial review, and the apparent low bidder's bid, or perhaps the second low bidder's bid, will be determined by the court to be non-responsive. The acceptance of either the RL bid or the McClure & Son bids or the Trenchline bid will also subject the city to monetary or injunctive relief claims from the parties whose bid was not accepted. The invitation to bid that was published by the city contains the following language. The city of Carlton reserves the right to reject any and all bids for good cause for any or any and all bids upon a finding that it is in the public interest to do so, to waive any irregularities and to accept the bid from the lowest responsible bidder, which is in the best interest of the city. 14, the city has good cause to reject all bids based upon A, the ambiguity in the bid documents creating uncertainty as to the requirements for a valid bid. B, the intent and procedures of the city, the fact that the intent and procedures of the city is to conduct a responsibility investigation after bids are received and not as a requirement for bidding. per the instructions of the bidders, and the qualifications of bidders section of the solicitation. C, the existence of two current written good faith bid protests challenging the validity of parent low bid and the second low bid on separate theories. D, the need to proceed with the project and for the project not to be delayed by litigation regarding which bid may be accepted by the city. E, the desire and need for the city council to protect the citizens of Carlton from the uncertainty of and the substantial costs of litigation and claims for injunctive and monetary relief arising from the bidding process. And F, the need to move forward with the project as soon as reasonably possible to support the housing needs of the city of Carlton. Finally, 15, it is in the public interest to reject all bids for good causes as described above and for the city to immediately instruct the city engineer to republish a new invitation to bid after revision of the solicitation documents, to delete the requirement for submission for any qualification information or form as part of the bid packet, and allowing proof of signatory authority either with or after submission of a bid if requested by the city. So that is the draft findings that we prepared in support of the city engineers and recommendations, and I think we should try to stop there. There's probably a question or two. Parenthetically, I would say that over my 40 years, this is the third time that I've run into a situation where bidders got into a squabble over the bids. In this case, you have two bid protests, which is unique in my experience. So it's really a three-party scramble, and the city is kind of caught in the middle, unfortunately. But there is a remedy. So with that, I'll stop and take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
I'm not sure if my questions, maybe for Gordon, would we anticipate these same people rebidding?
That's fairly common. I have rebid one other project and we had essentially the same bidders come back. So I would anticipate that they will.
Okay, thank you.
I'll respond additionally to that. The last time this occurred in my practice was with the McGuire Dam raise and done by the city of McMinnville, Warner Light. In that circumstance, there was technical challenges to the low bid raised. The Warner Light Commission determined that it was in the city's interest to rebid the project. It came in a month later, substantially the same bidders, and actually in that circumstance, the same low bidder actually received the winning bid and was awarded the project in that circumstance. So I concur with Gordon's comment that it's likely that we'll see the same group of bidders potentially bidding if they have a little more information about each other at this point.
How long will we keep the bid open this time?
Gordon, we talked about 2 to 3 weeks, so it'd be relatively quick.
Yeah, probably 3 weeks. So that's a little bit shorter than normal, but they all have the information now, so they don't need as much time.
The only question I had was the alternatives. It says to cancel the project and not accept funds from the state of Oregon.
So this is part of those grant funds, so if we were to cancel the project altogether.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
It's not about the revision.
correct.
So it's more of a comment than a question than a comment. It seems, with the ambiguity in the instructions that were interpreted differently by the different bidders and the potential, it could be likely that there would be litigation that would really hold things up and be very costly. In my mind, it seems the prudent thing to do to go through to reject the bid and rebid.
That is our conclusion and our recommendation.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
It's not worth waiting a month to start early and kind of gamble to get some litigation.
Well, ultimately, to get to that point, you have to accept one of the bids and give a notice of intent to award. And at that point, the protest can be acted upon. And if any of the companies decides to file a challenge, I would recommend that you not award at that point. There's a situation, a case involving the city of Portland about 15 years ago, where the city denied a bid protest, went ahead and awarded a contract, then was sued by the second low bidder, lost the case, was already in contract with the low bidder, and the project was underway when the court ordered it to stop. And that was a significant cost to the city of Portland that could have been avoided.
And we're actually getting to the end of construction season. We need to get, it's far enough along that we need to get
It's
this.
likely that you know, this type of construction goes on year round. So
Yeah, it's,
I make a motion that we reject all bids and rebid the project.
can I ask that that motion be based upon the findings submitted to the council in support of the engineer's recommendation?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Reject and reissue. All right, item G, resolution number 2021-315, budget adjustment.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, in front of you is a budget adjustment resolution to accept grant funds. Before we get to the budget resolution, Chief Martinez, would you speak to what this grant means in order for high visibility overtime enforcement?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So we're very fortunate to get this grant from ODOT, and it will enhance our efforts for vehicle and pedestrian safety to what we're already doing. So we're very glad that we have that in place with these additional funds. In addition to that, it will also put extra bodies on the street. So we'll have a better coverage on the street as well. So these grants are multi-purpose beneficial to our community with those two aspects.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Martinez, would you like to speak to the resolution that's in front of council?
Affirmative. This has no fiscal impact other than changing our appropriation dollars by receiving the 33,000 into revenue and increasing the overtime, and it washes each other out number wise, but no fiscal impact to the city.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Comments? Yes.
With the extra, chief, I think you're still there.
Yeah.
With the extra bodies on the street, is there gonna be some way for the city track this to see what actually happened and what has taken place?
Absolutely. When we get a grant, we track the results of that grant. And of course, it'll be incorporated in our the information we provide out in our newsletters and in our reports that we put together, like we did for the 10-year report. We'll accumulate that information into the upcoming. The next report will be a 5-year report, but again, it'll be all accounted for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion?
That we approve and authorizing mayor to sign resolution number 2021-315, authorizing budget adjustment for fiscal year 21-22 in an amount of $2,000.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item H, National League of Cities Line Program.
Mayor and City Council, you heard a presentation at your last meeting about the service line warranties program provided by HomeServe. At that point in time, there was a number of questions that came back to staff and the city attorney to look into about the marketing agreements as well as city experiences and approximate number of line breaks as well as profit versus nonprofit organization. That information is in your memorandum. City attorney, would you like to make any comments about the marketing agreement?
The marketing agreement is basically okay with several exceptions. One is it contains an indemnification agreement where the city indemnifies the company, and I don't see a reason for that under this circumstance. So I would suggest that that any motion would be subject to approval by the city attorney of the agreement. And I would suggest deleting that clause, which I don't think would be a problem. Secondarily, it also contains a waiver of jury trial. That's very unusual to see in some bank documents, but not in most contracts. I don't see any reason why the city should waive a jury trial if there's a dispute between the city on this matter. Third, there's a choice of law attorney fees provision that doesn't have an attorney fees provision in it, so we want to go ahead and insert one in there. And those are just several small technical changes, but I think the council can approve the execution of the agreement subject to modification by the city attorney.
Based upon the interest of a couple of council members in regards to this program, you have a recommendation to approve the non-royalty marketing agreement. However, also noted in your memorandum, there are other insurance coverage options for homeowners. So depending on the information received in your memorandum, council is free, of course, to ignore that recommendation. That's all.
Yes.
I have, after seeing some of the comments from the other cities that were reached out, I do have a little bit of concern. Initially, I thought this was a great idea. But with the Carlton, with our city stamping on it, and, you know, already knowing that we're short-staffed and we're struggling, it seems like, do we want to put that burden on our staff during this huge learning curve of this new program? It seems we might want to think about the repercussions of that. That was just something that stuck out to me. A lot of people said successful for the most part. You know what I mean? It seemed like there was a really rough ride at first to get the community educated about what they're receiving, because it seemed like a lot of it was, why am I getting this from the city? You know?
Yeah.
So that was my only concern reading some of the feedback.
Why is it necessary to have our logo on their mail?
My understanding is they believe that it encourages people in the validity of the program.
I was like, first, like, Kevin, you know, really like, wow, this sounds like a great idea. And then we got this packet that I'm reading the references from various cities, and, you know, I kind of interpreted them to be kind of mediocre, lukewarm. And I hadn't, until I read that, I hadn't thought about the fact that, you know, for us personally, I recall when we got our insurance, when we transferred to an insurance company, we were told that we were covered for that. And it just never dawned on me until I read it that that's an option with a lot of insurance companies. So I don't know how often that happens with most people with homeowners. I don't know.
Same thing with me. And I checked into it, and it was actually cheaper if you wanted to upgrade your insurance versus this program which you presented.
Yeah, isn't it better if people did that instead? Like, I don't see why we would endorse the for-profit company. If it was considerably cheaper, like, than upgrading your own insurance, like, we can be all for it. But if it's more expensive and they're making money out of us sort of endorsing them, I just feel kind of weird about it.
Yeah, they say that they are a nonprofit corporation. Don't they?
She indicated to us.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that's one.
I'm sorry. How did I get that? I would have, okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
The only risk that I would bring forward to the council, and I don't know how serious a risk it is that with the city logo on their marketing materials, there is
Yeah.
potential for people to assume that this is a city program and that their sewer line needs replacement or their water line leaks, that they call down and expect the city to come repair it for them and are angry when that does not happen. So there could be a kickback to the city simply because of the assumption that this is a city service because the city's logo is being used in the marketing. But that is, I don't know if that will be the case. It's one of the things that we discussed at our office as to the possible downsides of the program.
I guess my question with that is if for some reason the clients were not satisfied with the service, where is, unless there's clarification in the contract that the city is not liable or responsible for that, what's our exposure on something like that?
Well, I don't think that the city will have ultimate exposure, but the city can have to defend itself against angry people who might want to bring a small claims case for costs of replacing the water line that they thought the city had promised to replace it. They paid so much money.
What about the option of having a fund in the city? Is that something you entertain?
Ms. Martinez, do you want to speak to that?
I'm sorry, Jeremy, the audio cut out. What did you say?
About the option of having a fund in the city that could be used to sort of self-insure citizens with those lines.
You know, that would be an interesting concept. We'd have to put pen to paper and then bring it back to council for how that's going to be budgetarily or maybe running into next fiscal year. So now would be a good time to take a look at that. We can put it on a work session agenda topic to see what that would look like financially.
Right now, the city's water ordinance, sewer ordinance as well, clearly delineates the owner's responsibility for their own service liability. And by creating such a fund, you can create an impression that that is not the case. So unless you're going to change that and assume a obligation on the part of the city to repair mains or water lines, you want to be cautious in your approach. There is also setting up self-insurance funds is subject to the insurance commissioner's regulation in the state of Oregon for businesses and such. So we would have to check out whether it's lawful for us to do that to insure another party. The city can self-insure itself under provisions, but insuring a third party may bring into play insurance commissioner regulation about providing insurance. So those are concerns that I don't know the answer to.
Do we call it something else like a grant? Like something happens and the city can provide grants to the citizen and then.
Well, the city can always set up an assistance fund and have a certain amount of money that's authorized to provide in case of hardship. That's not uncommon. Some cities do that with regard to utility charges.
Okay.
That's certainly an option that the city.
So it could be simpler, essentially not being an insurance, just some sort of assistance.
Yeah, and it would be limited to the dollars that the council approves in a given year.
But Kevin, you said you checked with your insurance company and you're able, if you want to.
Yeah, my insurance company said that it's actually included in a lot of newer coverages and people just aren't aware of it. But if you retroactively went back and added it, it's like a $50 to $100 annual increase. So monthly, you can do the math. It's cheaper than what they were proposing. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah, and it does seem that most insurance companies do that. Homeowners insurance companies apparently do. A lot of them do have that option. So I've got to check on mine. So what do we want to do here, folks?
I
personally, go ahead, sorry.
I motion not to approve the League of Oregon Cities Service Line Warranty Program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Or it doesn't carry, as the case may be. Okay, number I, or letter I, the goal 1.4 comprehensive plan and development code RFP review.
Yes, Mayor and Council, in front of you is a draft RFP at the last council meeting. Council authorized us to move forward with an RFP to update the comprehensive plan in the development code. Attached is the draft RFP. There are 3 sections that council should weigh in on the questions there. That's about the time frame. It's also about additional objectives and example goals. And with the city attorney, I'd like to add anything.
I would defer to my associate Nicholas Keithley, who actually put together this RFP on behalf or Nicholas.
Yeah, so this RFP is largely the draft for redoing the comprehensive plan, the development code. In essence, it's still in a formative step where the city can adjust where they want the comprehensive plan and development code update to go. Most of the sections that are most malleable or outlined or highlighted in yellow right now. But as it stands, this RFP provides for a plan outline where the proposer can either update just the comprehensive plan or just the development code, or a comprehensive plan update and a development code update in a single proposal.
On page 2 of the draft RFP, how does council feel about the 20-year time frame?
Is that pretty typical?
Most cities that are redoing their comprehensive plan do it with 20 years out. That was what the city of Sisters did, and it's what a number of other cities in the area do, but it's not set in stone. Essentially, the amount of time that you look out on your comprehensive plan, it decides some of the factors that'll be considered or proposed by whichever consultant works on this. If you're planning on doing something further out 50 years into the future or something along those lines, your comprehensive plan might look something more along the lines of major infrastructure rebuilds with a long-term plan, rather than the current expectation is 20 or so year lifespans on certain things.
DLDC, the Department of Land Conservation Commission, has essentially a minimum requirement for 20-year grant. And most comprehensive plan updates are based on 20-year grant.
Besides the added cost, I'm wondering if it's too far out with the rate of growth we're experiencing right now. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Walt, you said it's a minimum of 20?
I believe the DLDC will not approve a comp plan upgrade that's less than a 20-year parameter. So you have to look at least 20 years in the future to assess your housing needs, your transportation needs. These are all elements of your comprehensive plan. They don't allow you to look out 5 years, right? They want you to, in a comprehensive plan amendment, it's designed to be, they look far enough into the future that you can have a significant amount of substance that you're dealing with, and not just short-term issues. So they want you to take a long-term, longer-term vision. And get you that thing. Now, your city planner could probably speak to that a lot better than I could, but the comp plan reviews almost, and the types of reviews that go into comp plan reviews, such as housing analysis, such typically have a required 20-year availability study. In other words, what land you need for industrial, commercial, residential, public facility, what you need over the next 20-year term. So they, organizations like Thousand Friends of Oregon, for instance, are going to propose to expand your urban growth boundary. They don't want you doing it on a 50-year parameter because they want to keep that farmland out there, protect it as long as they can, so they shorten the amount of time. They don't want you going 50 years, they really only want you going 20 years now. I don't believe the LDC will let you go less than 20, but you could choose to go perhaps 25.
I wouldn't want to go any longer than 20. I think 20 is a
Yeah.
good number, especially given what Walt just said.
Yeah, it seems to be. Right. 20 years goes by really fast.
It does.
We know that, huh? The other question would be H. The city can add anything that it wishes the update to reflect. For example, if the city has desires to bring in more tourism or light industry, this should be reflected as an objective of the update. Do we have?
These wouldn't necessarily be hard and fast restrictions or requirements for the consultant. In this case, for example, the city of Sisters, when they did their comprehensive plan update, much of theirs was based around community involvement and community engagement. So their comprehensive plan update involved the consultant needs to provide a plan that reaches out to the community on social media and Facebook and the internet and through email, and it ensures that every citizen takes part in updating the comprehensive plan. But that isn't a requirement of comprehensive plan update. It was more a specific desire of the city of Sisters. This is something similar to that, where you can sort of press the consultant in a direction you want your city to go while not specifically adjusting the comprehensive plan.
Questions or comments?
Let me just comment, just one small additional thought. The purpose of an RFP is to allow proposers to give you their vision for what you should do in terms of approaching this issue. And so you're looking for different viewpoints from your proposers who have done this in different places for different communities. And so by getting a variety of proposals, you can often get a variety of ideas in deciding which proposal meets your needs and how you might want to arrive at the agreement with the one with the proposal that you ultimately select, which may incorporate other proposers' suggestions. That agreement, so.
Okay.
Within this new comprehensive plan, that will give us the city more put in there. We can have more control on, say, subdivision as far as single family duplex apartments, size of lots, height and size of houses.
Within the parameters of state law, yes. Yes. For instance, the legislature recently passed a law that may not be binding yet in Carlton, depending on the size of the city, but may become binding in Carlton when you get to a certain size, that says that you cannot preclude certain types of what's called middle housing in any residential zone. That means duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, multiple family housing. So you may, though there may be a desire to have single family zone that's only single family houses, that may be contrary to where state law allows you to go. And so comprehensive plans not only deal with local desires, they also deal with statewide planning goals and have to fit within the parameters of those. So to be accepted, because any comprehensive plan amendment has to be approved by the commission in the DLCD. Yeah.
So what you're talking about though, in terms of zoning, et cetera, isn't that in the development code? So isn't that separate than the comprehensive?
Comprehensive plan sets the large parameters and goals, but this RFP talks about the potential updates of both.
Okay.
And I think the councilman was indicating that in relation to standards that deal with the development code, the city has more latitude there as long as it's not violating state standards.
I mean, so along those lines, in terms of zoning, what I have seen, when I was doing some research a while back, when we were first looking at JR1 and 2, is there are communities, I think Lapine might be one of them, and some other ones that have very extensive zoning, gives a lot of latitude on zoning, and which we don't have here in Carlton. I mean, that was sort of one of the issues, we're pretty limited. So I would like to see that reflected in here.
Yeah, and so the various proposers may want to propose that as part of that, they comment or review the options relative to the maximum options at the local level for determining those things.
Right. The other thing here on this page 133, development code on this list, what development code should include. Another area that I would like them to look at and for us to consider is restricting the kinds of businesses that we want to see or don't want to see in Carlton, i.e. Do we want to limit franchises? Do we want a dollar store here in Carlton? That has to be, I mean, because if it's not in your code, they can show up and put their dollar store. So.
Not there, they can show up tomorrow, we can't.
Right, so that's important, I think, to have that on this list here.
When sure gets there.
Thanks.
Can we do it?
Yeah.
Mara?
I got a quick question. What are the great neighborhood principles similar to the city of McMinnville? What are we encompassing there?
I'm sorry, I just jumped in there. The planning commission, can somebody else speak better to that? Yeah, well, the planning commission in McMinnville, did that, and I was given a copy of that, which I think I passed it on to Christie, and it eventually came to you. So that good neighborhood principles is a concept that I think the genesis of it is in McMinnville. Am I right about that? Well,
It beats me, I'm not involved with the planning commission. So.
very-
Nicholas, do you know the answer to that?
I actually don't. That provision was added after I worked on the draft.
it really is. Can we, Shannon, get a copy of that out to everybody for them to look at it?
I guess the reason I ask is like, what are we asking them? Like, what are those principles?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it'd be helpful. It's pretty extensive, and it really, really addresses, the look and feel of the community, what you want, having a livable community, et cetera. And it goes into a lot of detail.
It does a lot of community engagement, and the principals themselves don't necessarily have a plan to follow, but at the very end of the principles, there's several plans that the city is then required to implement, like street trees, and come up with a list of street trees, and how those are going to be maintained, or housing colors, or I'm pulling because I haven't read it recently. But there's a requirement at the end of those principles that the city have these types of plans in place to be able to refer to.
Many of the things that we've been wishing we had.
Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of it, on the top of it, the overriding principle is a community engagement.
Should we look at cities that are a little closer in size to us? Like instead of McMinnville is much larger than we are.
I think it's more the concept though. It's the principle as opposed to what they're actually doing in this big city. I mean, I haven't looked at that document for a while, but it would be helpful, I think, if you even just took a look at it. Yeah.
So I could, right now I have the development code should include, it could be rephrased as should address the concepts of great neighborhood principles, dog etiquette, off leash, parking of cars, trailers, and motorized vehicles and storage, improving walkability, all these concepts and principles that you can leverage other cities, large or small. But just that when it is being considered, that the person, the company actually look at those concepts. Those are important concepts the city council has articulated, at least to me, on an individual basis.
something I would like to see is, and maybe it's part of those principles, is the new developments, is it possible like to kind of have a park standard for like equipment, you know, so you don't just get this tiny little piece of equipment, you know, I don't know if that's doable, but that's part of the green space enhancements, like if we had some kind of standard for playground equipment for new developments.
Yeah.
I also personally am a huge fan of like the wider roads. Some neighborhoods, you can get really tight roads and parking on both sides. You can barely fit a car down there. I'd hate to see Carlton like that. That's one thing I do appreciate about Carlton's residential areas, or the width of the roads. I don't know if that's something that, you know, if everybody likes that too, but that's personal things.
Except Cunningham Street.
Except Cunningham. There's a couple.
Leave Cunningham
But,
alone.
right.
I didn't even want them to fix it. They're going too fast down it anymore.
Right, like Car Street, right?
Yeah, oh, cars.
Get those two and stuff.
I'd like to address to the governor recommendation about green energy. That you can include that comprehensive plan. I believe it's 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So it might be like something that should be included.
An example of that would be potentially solar standards for solar installations on residences or business.
I like the city hall to serve the example of that for solar
Yeah.
standards.
So what I heard so far is that the 20-year parameter is okay. There's not necessarily a specific objective or under H that needs to be outlined. But as far as addressing the development goals, reviewing all zoning options that are within the city control, restricting types of businesses, playground equipment standards, road width, and green energy principles such as solar. Then missing.
Anything else I can think of? Might be a good idea.
At all.
So is there any, as far as the water, is there any state law that prohibits, say like in the new subdivisions they're building, if they were to put 1,000-gallon tank or a 500-gallon tank in the front of their backyard, pump to it and collect rainwater to use that for irrigation, is that
Prohibited?
prohibited?
No.
I mean, is that against state law or
No.
anything?
No, rain is right now not within the category of water that must be permitted to be used. In other words, groundwater is and surface water, but rain comes from the sky. If you capture it before it hits the ground, or before it hits the surface or enters the ground, you can store it and use it. And so, you know, at my house, we have a rain bill that my wife likes to keep. She just likes the idea of using that. And so, I know a number of people that have rain bills, but I don't believe there's a standard related to it. We certainly pay one.
Which makes me think of maybe something that emphasizes water conservation and water, conservation friendly landscaping as we're looking at plants and landscaping.
So water conservation is an overall development goal, including landscaping, perhaps catchment of rainwater, or even inclusion of gray water systems.
Yes.
It might be worth noting that larger concepts such as water conservation or energy conservation could be worked into the comprehensive plan in addition to the development code. The comprehensive plan is for the broadest concepts that you would want the city to follow along. Development code would be more along the lines of you can't have a water barrel larger than 60 cubic feet in the backyard, something along those lines. Whereas the comprehensive plan would be the direction of our city desires to become more environmentally or conservation minded.
I would agree with that. I would also hate to see the city start being a big HOA and telling people what they can and can't do
Yeah.
in their front yards or backyards. So I want to cautiously say, I love the idea of water conservation, but I don't want to see rock front yards everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, going with what Nicholas just said, that would be a good place to put those kinds of things.
Some of the imaginative communities have, in their comprehensive plan, have policies that promote, for instance, on conservation landscaping, right? The creation of a secondary transmission system which uses recycled water from your lagoons to do outside gardening and watering for the purpose of conserving potable water for human consumption and using treated water for landscaping, while at the same time reducing the amount of treated water being dumped in the river, which is a goal of DEQ. So those all can go, those are concepts that can be folded into a comprehensive plan if you're looking at it from a high level view,
Right.
a 20-year view. And some cities have decided to invest in those types of policies. It's not cheap by any means, but it's also can be a way that you help operate your sewer system.
What about reducing pesticide spraying? What about reducing pesticide spraying?
I'm sure these consultants would have views on that.
Pesticide and herbicide.
Let that feel better to me.
I think that's coming.
Better go over real. Yeah, I mean, because a lot of those pesticides travel long distances. So when you have them, an ag field smack dab in the middle of a housing setting, it's becomes a conflict.
Or encouraging landscaping and educating to be able to do your landscaping without using herbicide, pesticides, doing herbicide, chemical free.
I think this topic will be perfect for a city survey, let you know what the citizens would like in the comprehensive plan.
And that's part of what you would expect any consultant to be doing. It's helping you conduct that.
So with those additions to the development part of that as in development goals, are you okay with us finalizing this RFP and issuing? Yes.
I move that we finalize the RFP and will it come back to us before you send it out, or?
If council wants it to come back, to review it one more time.
I guess my question was going to be, would council be involved in looking at the bids, the proposals that come in?
Yes.
So
You could set up a committee, staff and council committee that reviews your RFPs, and you may want to interview. The council may want to interview finalists, just like you do for a new city manager.
Is it gonna be similar to is it gonna be similar to our goals meeting? Like sort of put ideas together and make the comprehensive plan, or
Well,
more?
ultimately, the community engagement element of a plan update or development code update should have those kinds of community involvement pieces built into it. And that's what you want your proposers to describe how they would suggest doing it, because they've all done it. And they all probably have slightly different takes on it. But that's, I think community involvement and buy-in is probably the most important thing we do in this kind of update.
So I think I finished my motion.
Yeah, no.
So maybe I'll start all over. So I move that we authorize our city manager and our planner to proceed with the RFP and issue that RFP. For bids.
Moved and seconded. Is there a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Aye, and the vote carries. Go ahead. Which brings us to item J, the municipal building civic center discussion. Thanks for sticking around, Mark.
No problem.
Okay,
So as far as what I really need from council tonight is a decision on audio. If there's a decision on location, as we've evaluated locations and we've decided which one to move forward with, that would be helpful to know. If there are any decisions about additional uses or an absolute desire to make sure green infrastructure is included in the building. If that's able, if council feels they're at a point to be able to give direction on those, that would be helpful so that we can continue to modify the sketch and move forward and bring something to you at a September meeting. There's also the financing scenarios that we didn't get to in the work session. I'm not talking about that. You have some scenarios and what that would mean for annual debt service. Even if we start moving forward with reviewing the design, we can continue to explore these in additional council sessions. Even if we went with conventional financing, we can also continue to pursue grant opportunities. I suggested an option in there that council could also look at it with an advocacy organization to try to get some earmarked funds, federal funds and other state funds. We could still look at a conventional financing like we looked at with the wastewater plant, where we looked at financing, but we're looking at loans that if we were able to obtain grants or other items, that we could prepay down that loan without any penalty. So the financing does not have to be fully resolved before moving forward on some of these other items. So I don't know if council wants to tackle the audio equipment first, since that's the one I really do need an opinion on tonight. So right now with our current audio equipment that we are borrowing that was improved over our other system, that's about a $1,900 investment. I did hear from some counselors that there was still some feedback from the community that it was still hard to hear, especially some soft-spoken counselors. We know this room has sound issues with echoing with just the type of surfaces we have in here. So if we, with our timeline and where you think your comfortability is in moving ahead with this option, if you're okay with this is good enough, that's a $1,900 investment. If you want to invest in sort of a mid-level with the current equipment and panels that would go onto the walls to improve sound quality, that's approximately $5,400–$5,500. And then to proceed with the full audio equipment quote you have in there, you saw it was $11,000 plus. Some of that equipment can be reused in a larger council meeting room in another building. Some of it cannot. And some of it would be used here and then bought back. They stated they would buy it back, not at 100%, but they would buy it back at some cost. So I can explore those options with council if you want to walk through the $11,000 quote, but I don't want to waste your time if you've already leaned another way.
So what we have here tonight is the $1,900 option.
Yep.
I
And we
think this
don't-
has worked. Oops, I'm sorry. I think this has worked quite fine tonight. I'd be in
Thank you,
favor of this
Sebastian.
one.
You've been able to hear everybody okay?
Yes, I have.
If we have a plan for our next city hall, can we sort of estimate that something that will work here will be perfect for the next room we'll have, or is that not possible?
Because we don't know the size of the room at this point in time or what would be involved. No, we can't do a full estimate of what that would be involved in. We would certainly have the consultant involved in the room design, but no, we cannot purchase something that would be perfect for a larger room right now.
Do we see ourselves always offering Zoom? I mean, even if COVID were to go away?
Right now, the governor is requiring that you provide remote attendance and participation abilities. I don't foresee those ending anytime soon.
I'm happy with what we have.
The $1,900.
Yeah, I don't see the reason to spend more money.
Why does it cost 1,900 to use what we currently have? Is that just the maintenance?
We
Just
borrowed it.
how we borrowed it?
Yeah, I think especially if we're moving forward with the new buildings, we should stick with option 3 and spend as little as possible as it seems to be working.
Do we need a motion on this? Is there a motion to stick with the $1,900 option?
Yeah, I'll motion to stick with the 1,900 option.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you. Regarding locations of moving forward with option 3 from the last meeting, which is to rebuild a municipal building. Is there a need for further discussion on that, or is it narrowed down? What are the council's thoughts about the location?
Option 3 being here.
Option 3 being, I'm sorry, option 3 from the last meeting was rebuild. So option 1 was do nothing, option 2 was to remodel, option 3 was rebuild.
What is your question?
My question is that, is council ready to make a decision about the location of any future building?
We exhausted all, looking for locations and all options that exhausted in town.
Yes.
And those options were mainly just city-owned property and anything being looked into as far as purchasing property, an existing building on someone's place or a bare piece of property or any of that.
I've generally looked, somebody had mentioned the property across from the fire department, and I did some general inquiries, and my understanding is there's concern about fire flows with that property. In addition to the seller may not be quite ready to sell right now, or the owner may not be ready to sell right now, in addition to some environmental potential concerns.
I think given the state of our finances and the fact that we're already looking, at creative ways to finance this, it would be irresponsible to try to look to buy some other property. I think we're stuck with what the city owns. And ultimately, I think this is the site where a city hall and public safety building should be. I do appreciate the staff taking the time to research the other options, but I think right here is where we're at.
I agree.
I think that's kind of where we are.
Is there a motion for any future building to be on this location?
I make a motion for any future building or buildings to be at this location on Main Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Based upon the rough sketch that Mark provided to give council an idea of what a full 2-story option might look like conceptually. how does council wish to proceed on any mixed uses of the building? And that's for additional community uses, it would be retail space, green infrastructure, what are thoughts?
I'd like to hear from the community somehow.
So how would you like that to look, and what questions would you like asked?
That's not my expertise, but I think that we need to.
I would like to see us research that option that Christy talked about with the city website of reaching those 1,900 or so people. And again, forming the questions, would you like to see a mixed use space? I think would be a fair question.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase it? What would you like to see?
Mixed use, what space or building, city hall / retail, office.
Gathering space might be a nice term.
So, in a survey kind of there, an outreach, instead of just like throwing the question, directly out to the citizens to come, that maybe to provide them some parameters, examples of such as this, as opposed to just leaving it to them to come up with the idea.
I agree with you.
And that perhaps it might be something that Dan.
These are our choices. What would you like to see? What are your top 3? What do you
Yeah,
like?
exactly. Give them choices. And,
Yeah. What's important to you, maybe let's, and I don't know what those are. I just have a brainstorming meeting.
And I am asking because I just want to know the council's looking for, again, it's nobody's expertise here. And so the people who did have the expertise said it was cost prohibitive. So that's why I want the council in.
That's too bad because
The
the
survey.
school district used it and I don't understand why we could use it and it wasn't cost prohibitive. But maybe it's the 2 towns.
Because it was more district, it was more others.
Okay. Yeah. So what would we be asking on a survey?
So far I have, would you like to see a mixed use space such as retail, a community gathering space? Councilor Maher, is that what I heard?
Yeah, I thought that was a nice term. Something that would let them know that they could even borrow that space and it's theirs. It's open in that way. I think we could, excuse me, I think we could sort of change the image of what this has been so far if we start moving in that direction with some of this, with the additional city functions upstairs and behind or whatever.
like meeting spaces, classes, that type of thing.
Meeting, classroom, workshop spaces.
Also, I don't know if it's appropriate in that, or if that's going to be addressed elsewhere, but having a place for folks to come in the event of an emergency, or is that being handled elsewhere? Is that not included in this part?
We haven't really decided
I
that.
think with gathering space, that might be included with that.
Or an emergency shelter, emergency resources.
We could have a little area for the history of Carleton, make it, I want to say museum, that sounds like a huge building, but just a little tribute in some way that gives them a connection to what Carleton has been and where it's going.
I think that was something that was included actually in the original, in the.
Now, what has happened, won't they building some kind of a city center building down, or going to be building it down by the grade school?
YCTC is naturally.
It's a ways out.
And so that information was included in the memorandum. It's approximately at least 2 years out at this point in time, and it is primarily athletic focused. They will have some small meeting rooms, but at least right now, the concept is more athletic focused as far as the gymnasium and track.
Okay, so if they were to build that building, that fall into that seismic 2 or seismic 4, if needed to be, that can be used as a cooling warming station for the town?
It wouldn't fall within seismic 4. It could fall within seismic 2. It certainly could be a resource depending on whether or not they were able to staff a facility like that. And that could be a continuing partnership talk with YCTC as they move forward on their plans. And they have expressed interest in coming to council to have those talks. But again, they're at least 2 years out.
Yeah, their focus is going to be a lot different than what ours would be. So I think it would be a good adjunct and a good combination. But I don't know what the seismic requirements would be on a building like that.
Mark, the community center, would that be more of a seismic category 2?
Yep, exactly. Only if it's being used for an emergency operations center would it then kind of trigger that higher seismic requirement. You know, somebody made the comment of a cooling center, any kind of you know, opportunity like that would not fall into that category either. So, I mean, if you're providing services, that's totally fine. It's only when you start getting into the classification of emergency operations where you have to deal with outside jurisdictions and other folks coming to help in a disaster scenario.
If necessary, do you think we could have a special meeting where we could discuss those questions? Like we could come up with questions and gather ideas and have a few questions there, just show the survey. Or your idea is staff would just write those questions like where
We could take multiple approaches. I could draft what I've heard so far and send it out to council and get feedback from council and begin that survey process. Or we could have a special meeting dedicated just to this, just to developing questions. But I know there was concern about the specialists. Is that the right term?
Well, that's what we're doing right now, so.
I'm
That's what
just-
you suggest.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good idea, trying to do it at 8:30 at night, because right now,
Yeah.
I'll head up today.
But what about just the first crack at it, to have Shannon do an
Draft it,
initial
yeah.
draft, and then we look at it and kind of decide from there whether we need to
It's-
have another meeting.
It's possible seeing questions come in, it will trigger questions that we have, just like conversations do anyway. So maybe if that's a good, if everybody's comfortable with that, have Shannon do a first draft and send it out, and we can respond back.
I think we should all think about questions too. I think
Yeah.
coming up with that on the spot is a little hard, but I think if we
Yeah.
have time to think about it and ask our friends in the community, I think we can come up with good questions.
What would the goal be? We could get it on the next water bill or whatever on the website by a certain date.
Well, in order to get some feedback to council by the next meeting, I'd like to get it out on the website in the next week or so.
Can you put it in other places on the website? Because I don't think people look at the website. I mean, they might look at, I don't know where, on Facebook or somewhere, but people don't go out to the city of Carlton website just to look at it.
We can certainly, if we have next door as a good available option.
Sure, we also have, like, their like emergency contact list, and people sign up for the newsletters. I think that's what the 1,300 people that Christy was referring to. We can send them via email, the link to the website that goes directly to the survey. And it's free.
There was an amount of lists, an email list back in the day when the public would show up here and council. When they came in, they had to do name, address, and email for contact. Is that list still available?
We added them, everybody that put their email, that address on those, we added them to this list.
Okay.
So we got.
We're going to have a planning commission, not planning commission, but just something we discuss next week or the week after, right?
Yes.
Well,
We don't have the time yet. Should we like maybe put this with that, like discussing some questions, or that's not?
How does the city attorney feel about having?
Well, it could be a second agenda item for that if you wish to do that. I don't know how long the actual appeal will take. It may take a half an hour, it may take an hour and a half. It just depends on, if you have it as a second agenda item, you can decide to defer it if you think you've had enough for one evening.
Does council want it as a second agenda item?
I would like to kind of focus on what we're going to be dealing with.
That would give you a few more days to do up your draft and maybe add other things that you might think about too. Before you understand that.
So you're suggesting we should talk about it on the 12th?
No, I'm suggesting, I'm with Linda, that we need to take care of the thing on the 12th. Well, that's probably,
I think we're probably going to need to really focus on that. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we need to be focused. And when we get done with that, we might not feel like doing anything else. So. Okay, so we get to do a survey.
I was trying to help. No one wants Joe, apparently.
Is that,
No, you're not doing this. You're gonna write the question.
I know, I'm giving her a hard time, sorry. Do we need a motion for that one?
I think we're okay with the
Okay.
light up stuff.
Walt is leaving us, it looks like. Next.
Are there any discussion, any thoughts that council wants to have about financing tonight and or the advocacy organization discussion?
Perhaps you could just speak a little bit more about what the advocacy program, is, and perhaps we want to have somebody come in at a follow-up work session and give a presentation about that.
So this would not just be city hall focused. I want to be very clear and upfront about that. If the city were to consider doing an RFP or any sort of engagement process to engage an advocacy organization to work on behalf of the city, to work on a legislative agenda to find federal and state funds and advocate for us on that behalf, it would be focused on all of the large projects, the water, the sewer that you mentioned earlier, Councilor Erickson, finding funding for those to help the citizens of Carlton get the services that they need, the infrastructure improvements that they need. And so one way to explore doing that is engaging experts in that area through an advocacy organization. They do produce client-type materials, and I realize the materials in the back of the packet do not talk anything about City Hall, because it's just an example of what they would give to their client about funding opportunities that are coming available. But they would help the council, they would work with the council to set a legislative agenda up for the year. Then they would work on the city's behalf by engaging federal and state representatives to find funding opportunities. It is an option that the city would be spending money with the hopes of getting money. I did ask for just initial return on investments, it's about 24 to 30 to 1. I can engage somebody to come to the September work session to speak just on an organization, not a specific organization or somebody that we would necessarily engage with, but just speak about what the process would be, so they can speak from their point of view, if that's of interest to council, of just exploring
It seems like a good deal if you're gonna give one and get 30, right? But are they gonna actually do that? Like, it's my question, but these things too good to be true, and return of investment. But
I think it's, just back up a little bit, funds that we got, the 9.5 million for the water treatment and the transmission lines. That funding came through lottery dollars that was brought to our attention by Senator Boquist. And it actually was sort of I want to call it a stroke of luck, but we set up a legislative dinner, which we're doing annually with our representative state senator and our representative. And we had a dinner, and during that dinner, a conversation came about talking about our projects. And Senator Boquist said, well, let me look into that because I think there's dollars for that. So, I mean, that's an example, but that sort of wouldn't have happened if we weren't there, meeting with him. I believe that there's lots of opportunities out there, but we don't know where they are. And an organization, advocacy group such as that, that's what their focus is, so.
And the money for the sewer was kind of the same way. It came about because it started out, I happened to be going to a roundtable that our county commissioner was putting on. He mentioned, and we were looking at, what was going to be coming out, what was going to come to the state in terms of dollars from the ARPA funds. And I talked to Shannon and Christy about it, and we moved on from there to our state representative and brought him in and sat down and talked to him. And that's how we ended up with that. But those happened because we happened to be in the right place at the right time, both of those. What we're talking about here is somebody who is more often than not in the right place at the right time. And that is what they do.
Plus, with fingers crossed that we get a infrastructure bill passed federally, I'm just guessing that going forward, there's probably going to be a lot of opportunities out there, but we have no idea what they are unless there's a real expert that focuses on that. But
both of our state senators are very, very good about trying to let people know, and I know that our state representative is too. They spend a lot of time their field workers spend a lot of time trying to get that all out to us, but it's just a huge amount of information for them to be shoveling out. It's a huge amount of information for us to keep track of if we don't have one person that's actually keeping track of those things.
So
The dollar amount. I'm sorry, how much will it cost? Do we know?
Well, we would want to do a solicitation. Estimates could be 50, 60 a year.
It's essentially like having a staff that you essentially just focus on looking at those things, like salary looking, I guess, 1 year.
Yeah.
Is it, I don't know, is that something we could entertain in the future? Is that going out? We just have someone in charge of just looking at funds and grants and stuff like that?
We certainly can look at a staff member. It does take a specialized skill set to be there, and generally these organizations, they do have feet on the ground in DC, and so they're able to make those contacts, whereas obviously a staff person here, we wouldn't necessarily have them in DC. So there's different levels. Could we explore in the future having a staff person solely dedicated to searching for different types of grants? Absolutely. As far as advocacy on a federal level, that might be a different place, different skill set.
well, I would be for having a representative from an organization such as that come to a work session and just brief us on what it is they can do. And
Maybe give us a little bit more detail on what they do, how they do it, what this involves, and what it would look like.
I mean, to give them a year and see what they get.
Yeah.
Interested in hearing from somebody?
yes.
Okay. Is there anything you want to see from Mark or Holst and by your September meeting?
No, I would just look up on that old log cabin building there. And everybody old timers used to go there.
Yeah.
City Hall was kind of duplicated. I mean, that was a very focal point in town forever.
Because it's like that inside.
Yeah. But something of, you know, I mean,
Rebuilt.
very historic looking, fit right back in with all the buildings we have. I don't know, if Mark, I'm sure maybe you've seen that picture. I'm sure Shannon can send you a copy. Something of that would be maybe some, that I call them minor big blueprints of something more on the back instead of those angled roof lines that they were showing.
Well, he was, yeah. Maybe look at incorporating a lot of those features.
Yeah.
So you'd like to see something from Mark at the next meeting that sort of incorporated those features?
Yeah. But that, you know, that type of roof line more so those angled roof lines that we had on the other.
Well, this one is, these are more square.
That one, yeah. There was a couple of kind of angled look out.
So maybe on that, as Mark said, it was sort of a quick and dirty design, but maybe spend a little more time and expense to, you know, embellish it a bit more for us to look at.
I'd like to see the roof. I don't know how it needs to be, but improve upon looking at solar panels and how more effective can be built. Like, I don't know if just like that would be very good for it, or it has to be angled, but whatever needs to be, maybe the windows be optimized for more sunlight coming through the building. Looking more into the.
I was gonna say, one way or another, focus on incorporating
Looking at.
renewable energy.
Yeah.
That's right.
And Mark, I like the perspective when you were beginning to show us what our corners would look like there if we did the whole spot. So maybe just a quick rendering of the potential for some community area, retail spaces, just that, how that would flow, you know.
And we could put a tavern in the corner. Which would pay for the building.
Little cafe.
Now you're talking.
Do we, sorry,
No, go ahead.
do we feel like, I hate to go backwards, but are we looking at one building again? Like to Mark, I mean, I feel like that'd be beneficial to Mark to say, hey, we're back to one building, class 4. Or are we saying we want both options still on the table? I don't, it's just a
I
question.
keep hearing when everybody starts talking about it, that we start talking about one building. I mean, we'll
I think so.
go out to 2, and then when we start kind of casually talking, the mindset seems to be going into one building.
We can help provide some clarity on that for y'all. We can develop a couple of site sketches that aren't just, you know, renderings of the exterior of the building, which is what you've seen tonight. We can look at some programmatic site development that shows the locations and sizes of what these elements might look like as a single building and 2 buildings that maybe expand all the way across the full site, including the adjacent lot.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So far what I've heard for the September meeting for this goal is try to get a first blush, at least an initial survey out, to see if we can get any feedback for that September meeting. Then looking at the clarifying the 1 building versus 2 building with Mark, but also looking with renewable energy, looking at corner angles, looking at how things would be integrated as far as retail and community space and flow, and incorporating the design of that building. So that's going to be features of that building. So is that sufficient, or does council want anything else related to this goal at the September meeting?
I'm good with what you said. For
Okay.
me.
I think one thing I was gonna, maybe it's far out reach, but if we consider the separate building, I know the fire station, fire district is different, but I don't know if it's a possibility, but just, it makes sense to me to have a fire station and police station right next to each other, or at least they help each other and they do things similar, so I don't know if it's something that can happen,
I will attend the fire board meeting next week and ask the question. I'm not sure there's enough room on that site to add a police facility, plus since police are a city function and then fire is a district option, there may be some challenges with that. In addition, I know Mark had enlightened me that when this was envisioned as one building rather than having separate locations, is being able to share staffing amongst the public safety and administrative functions. So we were able to gain efficiency of staff and maximize those resources, which we would lose if they're at different locations.
Okay.
So with that said, how much staffing does the police department side have? The city side? I mean, we have 4 police officers, the chief, before. Is there then someone in that police building that is doing secretarial type stuff all day long, or?
So administration supports the public safety side and taking phone calls and greeting people as they come in who need to report to the public safety side. There also is personnel that helps with filing as well as other administrative work. Amy, can you, or Christy, can you speak to that a little further in greater detail?
Yeah, so administrative staff does a multitude of support functions. One is the court is solely on the administrative staff. So all citations, written disbursements are done by the court clerk, which is extensive. And the staff at the city basically works as a dispatch office. We get calls daily for, I've lost my keys, there's a dog on the loose. Those don't go immediately to the police department. They're fielded by us, most generally for small items like that. So we are always apprising the officers. We have a system where it goes straight to their phones. So no matter where they're at, they get it. And then on top of that, we support them when, for example, the missing person that we just recently had, the chief was able to call the office. Can you get this posted? Can you get, because they were out scrambling, trying to find the endangered teenager. So we were posting, we were putting it on the website. We did emergency alerts for them. So we kind of work in tandem, not only on the little stuff, but on some major issues. So I don't know if that helps clarify, but the court function is all on the administrative side. The officers are independent of that. They can't have anything to do with the court functions.
so it's essentially just phone. Just taking phone calls and forwarding to the police.
But it's not just phone, it's also putting out emergency alerts. It's also getting notices out to business, so physically walking and posting notices, as was used in that example of the missing person. It's a lot of different areas.
Providing
It's not-
staff support for the court.
Yeah.
We actually have the court that we do hold here, yeah.
Receiving visitors.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of counter traffic for police only that come in, where we have suspects coming, victims coming, and people needing police services. So it's not just phone support, it's actual in-person support too.
Is council okay with those items coming forward to the September meeting?
Yes,
Related to this goal.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I will get draft questions out to you by the end of the week for feedback, so we can hopefully get something out, again, just to at least get you an initial flush with any feedback that comes in.
Sounds good. Is there anything else?
Just one comment by my mayor. this council is going to be sitting as an appellate body on 12th in relation to a land use matter. Some of you are newer on the council than others, and may or may not have training regarding your role as a quasi judicial officer. In other words, when you sit in an appellate position, your job is to make a decision based upon the record of the proceeding. And so your council rules require that you avoid what's called ex parte contacts. In other words, your job is not to be talking to the community about this prior to the appeal, but to rely on the information that's brought to you at the appeal. And so if you do have substantive conversations with somebody, you're required to disclose them and indicate whether you can remain impartial and give a decision. But my advice to you is just don't do it. Just avoid conversations that people want to talk to you politely, excuse yourself and say, I have an appeal coming up on that. I'm not supposed to be discussing it outside of that council chamber. So just a heads up for those of you that haven't been on the council as long as others and may not have sat through an appeal of this sort.
Can you look at the planning commission last meeting they had about that? Or
Excuse me?
can you look at the planning commission?
That will be a part of the record that comes to you as a part of your packet that will come to you.
Shannon, can you tell me when that packet will be available?
Amy and I were just discussing that today, and we are going to try to get it out no later than next Tuesday.
Yeah, because but I could get some, I'm leaving here on Tuesday because I'm taking the call by Zoom. So, but I can access it electronically.
Yes.
Okay. Is it going to be a big, huge packet or?
An idea of the size, it's going to be fairly large.
Yeah. The original planning commission packet was just under 400 pages, but that was 2, so this will be half that, so it's at least.
Is there any part of it that I could get in advance and wait for?
I think it should all come out at once. I should go out to everyone at the same
I'm not
time.
going to be able to print it. I'm just going to have to be able to look at it online.
Right. Yeah. So it'll be available next Tuesday.
Do we have a time for the meeting yet?
6 p.m.
On Thursday, the 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walt. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nicholas. Thanks for hanging in. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On Wednesday.
Thanks, folks.